I'm back. I have some extraordinary stories to tell you. My article is up on Substack. It is an indictment of Kristi Noem, John Thune, Marty Jackley, and other people within the Trump administration, including Lewandowski. It follows them from my first encounter with them in 2012, leading up into 2026, including up to yesterday. Within this story, which is over 60,000 words, it's a book, and 620 paragraphs, I detail every single thing that they did and why I believe it is a crime. To everybody that said you can't write a federal indictment, it's really hard. You know you're doing it right if you cry, I'll say that. My response to you can't do it is Janine Shapiro. I did have a couple paragraphs that were speculative and argumentative and maybe not as formal as they should be, to which I say Todd Blanche. Everybody says that nothing's going to come of this. I say Merrick Garland and Jack Smith. But my point is this. Throughout this story, which ends up being 60,000 words, about 150 pages, is that there's some remarkable stories in here and some crazy things that happened along the way. So I interviewed multiple whistleblowers from just about every department within the Department of Homeland Security, or within the state of South Dakota, some from the Department of Homeland Security, other journalists, even a Proud Boys former member, and we just start matching up timelines and putting things together. So one of the key stories in this, a key theme in all of this, and as you recall, my big story I wrote May 18th of last year, ends up getting stolen. So I probably have a little something personal in this because I lean my arguments very heavily on Lanham and the way that trade secret violations were absolutely critical in the enterprise's existence and for it to survive, for it to keep going. And I use examples, right, because there has to be plaintiffs. I don't have standing from Theo Bond to Sabrina Carpenter to different artists, etc., that the Department of Homeland Security under Tricia McLaughlin, right, was using trade secret violations to create these posts. The other reason I rely on trade secret is because, recall, millions and millions and millions, maybe billions of dollars begins to go to these media companies. And so I'm also reaffirming, right, that they are a shell and none of their producibles are like created by them. And this is to allow them to take more cream off the top. But this all starts, as I've told you guys before, with Freedom Works here in South Dakota. This is going to happen between 2021 and 2022 because I need to show continuity, right? This is RICO. So Tricia McLaughlin dates Ben Yoho. Ben Yoho and Corey Lewandowski get that contract here, and we find out it's a no-bid contract, just like what we're seeing here with the funds being diverted to them. And so what happens is they send a bid out. We all know this. We find out it was rigged and all going to Lewandowski, Yoho, and McLaughlin from the jump, right? But what they do is they steal this other company's, they stole the RFP somebody else submitted and stole all of their work, their, intellectual property for this, which was bad enough. But as I'm finishing this up, I get a message on the anniversary of the day I wrote the Noem article. And it's something they wrote but haven't published yet. They're going to remain anonymous in this. But recall when I sent the story to Republica that I said I had given them names of people that I know that they could talk to reaffirm my story, not to go write it by interviewing them. But alas, I learn now that that is what they did. And this person wrote this remarkable thing about how difficult it was to watch their words be read on the House floor, to not understand when they decided to go to the press, or the press came to them because of me. They didn't know this. They didn't know this. They didn't even know I wrote that article until they began reading it after they sent me this. And it was so surreal, right? To have somebody in there that knows what it's like to be like, why was this story held? We knew, we were telling people, we were trying to stop the bad thing from happening. So that was crazy. But what's more remarkable is that this person worked in a position where they were able to see everything from the back end to really tighten up, right? Everything I was talking about, the way that people were pushed out of their jobs, when they pushed back, when they were saying, hey, this company doesn't really make media. Like, what are we supposed to be doing? This is millions and millions of dollars. And it goes through all these resignations and firings that were unlawful surrounding Corey Lewandowski, Ben Yoho, Tricia McLaughlin, and Kristi Noem at the time. No less than an hour later, right? So we already know they stole the intellectual property, the design itself. I get a message and the email is FreedomWorks. And I'm like, oh shit. What this person communicates to me, and they can prove it, is that 4 years before this FreedomWorks Year campaign ever happened, that they have a business called FreedomWorks, and that they have correspondence from their email called FreedomWorks with the governor's office in the legislature. So now there's this full circle moment where I already know the bidders story. I already know what happened. But now I'm getting this timeline from somebody from the backdrop, talking about the retaliation and everything. And then we find out that the actual name was also stolen. Throughout this story, there's going to be breaking news. I wanted to keep it interesting because it's long. There's breaking news in there, particularly about Nick Shirley, which I think people are going to find very relevant. This is going to deal with the arguments I make that all of the invasion of Minnesota, as well as sending people to El Salvador and the strikes on Venezuela, were all pretextual and pre-planned. And I talk about the first time that these ideas come to be. But then Nick Shirley's rolling it because we find out that DHS becomes kind of enmeshed with the pro-Israel lobby. And then Nick Shirley has this idea, well, instead of being a paid influencer for Israel or DHS, we're just going to make it look like I'm doing independent journalism. He goes to CCOT before Kristi Noem, before Corey Lewandowski, Ben Yoho, and all those folks. and creates a propaganda piece for Fox News before we even deport anybody there. So, of course, he's a paid shill. But then we learn that it is Dr. Oz's, within this network, former campaign strategist, helping to pull off all of these strings. And of course, I name names, addresses, everything you need to know about the enterprise. At which point, this is where we learned that in Minnesota, in California, in Ohio, Springfield specifically, that the reason they were targeting these communities is because it was pretextual and planned probably around the year 2019. And because of the Israel influence, the point, of course, was to eradicate Muslims in the United States. They are also behind going up against all of these mosques. So it's diabolical. The third argument in there, this isn't breaking news, but this is a legal theory that I think is going to be very important in keeping Corey Lewandowski held accountable. So I would like to read that for you now.